Let me tell you something. Nothing will ruin your morning coffee faster than the sight of a chain link fence slicing straight through the heart of your own front yard. You think I'm exaggerating. Picture this. You walk outside ready to water the roses your late wife planted, and there's a construction crew hammering posts into what used to be your sanctuary, while a woman in a bubblegum pink tracksuit waves a clipboard like she's about to knight someone. I wish I could say I made that up. But no, that was the day I met Karen Miller, the freshly crowned queen of the Whispering Pines Homeowners Association. That fence is 37 feet inside my property line, and you have exactly 1 hour to get your crew and your materials off my land before I call the sheriff. I remember my voice was steady as a surveyor's transit, which, funny enough, is a skill I learned over 20 years with the Army Corps of Engineers. Karen didn't flinch. She just kind of scoffed like she gets up every morning and practices it in the mirror. According to the official HOA plat, she said, pinching her clipboard with the seriousness of a royal decree, this entire section is now designated HOA, Common Area, part of our Beautification and Boundary Integrity Project. Your little vegetable garden violation of Article 9, Section C, by the way, is soon to be a petunia bed. She said it all like I should feel honored. Then she jabbed her finger at my old F-250. And your truck is currently trespassing on community property. You have 24 hours to move it or it'll be towed at your expense, plus $50 per day for the violation. The audacity in that moment, I almost laughed out loud, but all I could do was stare dumbfounded as her workers kept unspooling that fence, the sun glinting off the metal like a serpent, winding its way through everything my wife and I had built together. That fence didn't just cut across my driveway, it ran right through the patch of earth where Sarah had planted her prize-winning roses just before she died. The steel posts, already sunk in concrete, looked like tombstones to me. Markers for the death of reason, or at least the end of my quiet retirement. Make no mistake, that was the day my war with the HOA began. Now, if you've ever tangled with a power-mad HOA president, I don't have to explain the feeling. If you haven't, well, pour yourself a stiff drink and count your blessings. But back to the battle at hand. The workers, I could tell, were just doing a job. My real fight wasn't with them, it was with the pastel tyrant in front of me and the little kingdom she'd built next door. I raised my hand, the universal sign for stop, though. Apparently it's not in the HOA president handbook. Those men need to stop driving posts into my land, right now. Karen's smile was just a thin line. They work for the HOA, not you, she said. You are not a member of this community. This is our property now. We have the paperwork. She tapped that clipboard like it was a gavel in the Supreme Court. It hit me then this wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a land grab, orchestrated by someone who genuinely believed a stack of bylaws trumped a deed and 30 years of history. She'd made a big mistake, though she had no idea who she was up against. See, before I retired, I was the senior county surveyor right here. 15 years ago, I personally drew and signed the official boundary lines for both my land and the entire Whispering Pines subdivision. Karen hadn't picked a fight with some retiree puttering around in his garden. She'd declared war on the guy who literally wrote the map. I didn't yell, I didn't threaten. I just gave her a long, cold stare, the kind that promises you're about to have a very bad month, and walked away. My first calls weren't to the sheriff. They were to my lawyer and a buddy at the county records office. See, my land isn't just dirt and grass. It's the place where Sarah and I sunk every penny we had cleared brush with our own hands and built a home from the ground up, a place where every stone in the fireplace holds a memory. When the county first developed Whispering Pines, I was the one who walked those lines, drove the stakes, double-checked every measurement. The old oak in my yard was the landmark. Sarah's grave up on a small rise under that tree was the last place she wanted to rest. Now Karen's fence sat less than 20 feet from her grave. The rage I felt, that cold old fury from a younger man's days, almost got the better of me. But rage is a blunt instrument. I needed a scalpel. Inside my office, surrounded by maps and deeds, I pulled out the originals. My deed, my survey, the official plat map with my signature still sharp and proud after all these years. I wrote a letter, polite, precise, with every legal citation a judge could dream of, explaining the mistake and offering a reasonable solution. Stop the work, meet me at the boundary, and let's resolve this like adults. I mailed it, hand-delivered a copy, got receipts and signatures. I thought naively it turns out that logic and proof would end the matter. I even offered them an off-ramp, a quiet way out. But I'd forgotten the prime law of HOA dictatorship's logic is treason. A week later, I got a final notice of violation in my mailbox. No apology. Just a $500 fine for unauthorized structures and failure to comply with landscaping mandates. Signed, of course, by Karen Miller herself. I was still shaking my head when the next volley arrived, a cease and desist letter from a law firm so comically named I had to laugh. Dewey, Cheatham, and Howe. It accused me of harassing the HOA president, interfering with community projects, and threatened a restraining order if I kept disputing the boundary. At that point, my strategy had to change. Appealing to reason was like teaching calculus to a cinder block. Karen was betting I'd cave to intimidation, that I'd be too old or too tired to fight a war of paperwork. She was wrong. She'd underestimated the wrong man. My new plan was a campaign, not a single battle. Phase 1 intelligence gathering. State law gave me the right to request HOA records, so I demanded everything. Meeting minutes, budgets, the text of their bylaws, and most important, the independently contracted survey that was supposedly backing her play. I even notified her lawyer that if they continued this nonsense, I'd be adding his firm to my lawsuit. A week later, a thick manila envelope landed on my porch. They must have figured they'd bury me in paper. Joke's on them. I read every word, every number, every passive-aggressive note in the meeting minutes. Karen's fingerprints were everywhere, vetoing paint colors, fining families for a tricycle left on the driveway, running up bills for community engagement events that turned out to be catered lunches for herself and her cronies. The survey map, a blurry low-res copy from a company whose license had expired, legally worthless. The kind of thing a kid would sketch on a napkin. But the real twist came late that night when I was cross-referencing old county maps. There it was, a forgotten 20-foot-wide county easement recorded over 100 years ago, cutting straight through Whispering Pines. That public right-of-way ran right under Karen's new, very expensive gazebo. Now I had them. But it takes more than evidence to win a war. You need allies. That Saturday, I watched Karen busting a young couple over grass height. The guy, David Garcia, looked ready to snap. I introduced myself that afternoon. Turns out he and his wife Elena had been fined for everything under the sun: trash cans, a sandbox, their daughter's tricycle. I showed them my files, the maps, the fake survey. Their frustration hardened into resolve. "We're just renters," David said. "We feel powerless." I told him, "Not powerless. You have rights. Show this to your neighbors. People need to see what's really going on." That evening, David started knocking on doors. The rebellion was brewing, not led by me, the outsider, but by people she'd tried to bully into silence. While they rallied the neighbors, I ramped up the paperwork. I notified the HOA board, the state ombudsman, and the county surveyor's office all at once. I forced the county's hand. They had to perform an official boundary determination. I even baited Karen by submitting her fraudulent map as evidence, daring her to defend it on the record. Meanwhile, I sent a formal letter to the county administrator about the blocked public easement. The gazebo was now a ticking time bomb. For 2 weeks, silence. Tension so thick you could chew it. Then came the day of reckoning. The county surveyor, Tom, a guy I trained years ago, showed up with his assistant and a laser level. Karen arrived dressed like an angry robin's egg, flanked by nervous board members. She shoved her fake survey at Tom, who barely glanced at it before saying, "We'll be working from the recorded plat maps." I pointed out the boundary markers, details I knew by heart. Tom's assistant found the rebar under the oak, set up the total station, and shot the line. A red laser traced a path through my driveway and up the hill, nowhere near the fence. The air was electric. Karen paled, her voice trembling. "That can't be right. Your machine is broken." Tom was polite but firm. "This fence is encroaching by 37.4 feet at the road. It's on Mr. Thorne's property." There was no more argument to be had. The next HOA meeting was the stuff of legend. The room was packed, people holding violation notices, budget printouts, and righteous anger. Karen tried to shut down discussion, but David Garcia, now a hero in his own right, cited the bylaws to force a vote. I presented everything: maps, surveys, drone photos, the expired license, the forgotten easement. When I explained the fence and gazebo both had to be removed at the HOA's expense, the place erupted. David stood on a chair and called for a vote of no confidence in Karen. The crowd roared. Her empire of clipboards and bylaws came crashing down. That night, the HOA lawyer called, suddenly all apologies. I laid out my terms, the fence gone in 10 days, $5,000 in damages and full restoration by my chosen landscaper, or I'd sue everyone involved personally. They caved. The fence came down, the land healed. Sarah's roses were left undisturbed. Karen. I saw her once more sitting alone in her golf cart, no longer a queen, but a shadow. You ruined everything, she muttered. No, Karen. You did. You never understood what that line meant. It's about respect, about knowing where you end and someone else begins. She looked away, and I went home. War over. The HOA under new leadership changed. They ditched the draconian bylaws, rescinded dozens of petty fines, and finally started listening to people. David was elected vice president, pushing for transparency. The check arrived, the land was restored, and the county forced the gazebo to be demolished right on schedule, a permanent lesson in concrete and rebar about what happens when you cross a line you have no right to. One evening I stood by Sarah's marker watching the sun sink behind the oak. The land was quiet, undivided, at peace. And I realized this was never just about dirt or fences. It was about standing up to those who think power gives them the right to trample what matters most. Authority isn't about titles or clipboards or loud voices. It's about integrity, diligence, and the quiet certainty of being in the right. I held my ground, used the system, and beat someone who tried to abuse it. The scars faded, the lawn grew back. In the end, boundaries aren't just lines on a map. They're the silent agreements that let us live together in peace. When someone forgets that the cost isn't just money or concrete, but trust and community. And maybe that's the real lesson here. You cross certain lines. Sometimes there's no going back. My land was whole. Sarah's memory undisturbed. Karen's kingdom a pile of rubble. Justice served. But I can't help but wonder, where's the line between standing your ground and becoming just as ruthless as the people you're fighting? When does defending your rights become vengeance? Maybe you've tangled with a bully like Karen. Or maybe you've been the one pushing too far without realizing. Either way, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Where do you draw the line? Drop your story or opinion below. Let's talk about what's right, what's just, and what it means to stand up for your own little piece of the world.
Cảm ơn các bạn đã xem video. Cảm ơn các bạn đã xem video.